Conflict of interest. A conflict of interest arises when a council member allows any private interest of theirs to interfere with their ability to properly perform their duties in public office. Two authorities govern conflict of interest. There are provisions found in the Municipal Government Act, and councils are also required to have a conflict of interest bylaw. For the purposes of this presentation, both the provisions of the Municipal Government Act and provisions in the draft Conflict of Interest bylaw will be referred to. If you have those handy, have a look now at section 96 and 97. In this section, we'll cover when conflicts of interest arise and what the duties are of council members to manage those conflicts of interest. We'll look at private and pecuniary interests, the fiduciary duty of elected officials to their residents with respect to conflicts, what happens to disqualify members from serving on council, when council can pardon conflicts of interest that exist. There are exceptions as well to certain conflicts of interest within the Municipal Government Act. Citizens or residents can make complaints, as can other council members, that there is conflict of interest. If council members are in a conflict and sit out of the discussion due to the conflict, there can be effects on quorum and voting at council meetings. And finally, we'll cover the Municipal Government Act's requirement for council to ensure a code of conduct for employees with respect to conflicts exists. The Municipal Government Act and the draft Conflict of Interest bylaw provide that a council member is in a conflict of interest if, in relation to a matter under consideration by council, the member or a person closely connected to the member has any pecuniary interest, is a shareholder, officer, agent, or director of a corporation or other organization that has dealings or a contract with the municipality, is a party dealing or has a contract with the municipality, or is a member of a partnership that has a dealing or a contract with the municipality, or if the member makes a decision or participates in making a decision in the execution of their duty as council, while at the same time the member knows or ought to know that the member's private interests or the private interest of a person closely connected to the council members may affect the member's impartiality in the making of the decision. A private interest can be defined as a relationship, obligation, duty, responsibility, or benefit unique to the member of council or a person closely connected to the member of council. The Municipal Government Act does not define private interest, but there is a common law test for determining whether a particular self-interest of a council member would trigger a conflict. That test is, would a reasonably well-informed person consider that the interest might have an influence on the exercise of the official's public duty? Now we define pecuniary interest. And the draft Conflict of Interest bylaw defines this term as money or monetary matters, or that which can be valued in money. Now, the Municipal Government Act has a provision that limits the possible pecuniary interests which a council member may have. And those limitations or exceptions are found in section 96(5) of the Municipal Government Act. The process for a council member who is in a conflict of interest, whether it's an actual conflict or a perceived conflict, is described in section 6.6 of the draft bylaw and section 96(3) of the Municipal Government Act. The process requires that the council member promptly declare their interest in the matter before council in a timely manner. They must remove themselves from any meeting where the matter is being discussed, just until that discussion has been had and voting has occurred. They must abstain from discussion and voting on the matter. And finally, they can't in any way attempt before, during, or after the meeting, attempt to influence any other councillor or influence the decision or vote regarding the matter. There is a high standard of conduct required by councillors, and you'll see that referred to in section 96.3 of the MGA. The draft bylaw reflects that the onus is on the individual councillor to self-discern, so decide for themselves, and then self-declare any potential conflict of interest. Council members must ensure that a conflict of interest is brought to the attention of council as soon as it arises. So back to that timely manner requirement. They must declare the interest before any discussion on the matter, and this could be at a council meeting, a committee meeting, or a public meeting. If a conflict arises after it has been addressed by council, the member is still required to disclose the conflict of interest, again, as soon as possible. In addition to the obligation to self-report, a member may also be the subject of a complaint of conflict from another member of council or an elector. An elector can make a complaint in writing that a conflict of interest has occurred. In each case, council as a whole decides if the conflict is valid or not. In the draft bylaw, you'll see that it provides if a complaint is made that a member of council is in a conflict of interest, council will consider all relevant information and will determine by vote if a conflict of interest exists. If a conflict of interest exists and a council member fails to declare their conflict and fails to follow the process laid out in the Municipal Government Act, a councillor can be disqualified from serving on council. On the other hand, if council is satisfied that the member's action was inadvertent or due to a genuine error, council may pardon the actions of that council member. Section 1142 of the MGA provides that any council member who has a conflict shall not be counted for the purpose of determining whether a quorum of council is present for discussion and voting on that matter. Now, if this occurs and the number of council members who have a conflict result in a loss of quorum in a discussion or a vote, the remaining members are deemed to be a quorum for that discussion or a vote. Now, there is an exception to this when council is down to just one member. And finally, Section 86F requires that in addition to the conflict of interest bylaw for council, a municipality must have a code of conduct for employees, which includes conflict of interest rules that prohibit an employee from using information obtained in their employment, which is not available to the public, to further their interests or the interests of someone that they are closely connected to. And they're also prohibited from using their position to seek to influence the decision of another person to further or seek to further the private interests of the employee or a person closely connected to their employee.